Hi friends, 2 days back, IMF has released a report known as Fiscal Monitor Report. Let us understand what is in that report and how is it different from another report that we already discussed called World Economic Outlook. Let's begin. In one of our previous videos, we discussed about World Economic Outlook report released by the IMF. Today, we will discuss about yet another report of IMF called Fiscal Monitor. What is the difference between these two, World Economic Outlook versus Fiscal Monitor? Both are released twice a year, that is April and October. The World Economic Outlook, as we discussed, it covers macroeconomic indicators like the GDP growth and the inflation across countries. Fiscal Monitor Report, on the other hand, analyzes the government debt, the government deficits, budget deficits, and the spending efficiency. Before we start to look into that report, we need to be aware of some financial terms like public debt, debt refinancing, budget deficit, which is the same as fiscal deficit of India, current account deficit, and balance of payments. A government of any country will have income and expenditure. A government's income includes taxes like direct taxes you pay from your salary and indirect tax which you pay through GST. Customs duties, cesses, income from selling stakes in public companies called disinvestment, and so on. Its expenditure includes salaries, defense expenditure, building roads, hospital, etc., etc. In almost all the cases, government income is less than its spending. So a mismatch happens. This mismatch is called fiscal deficit in India and budget deficit in the US. Both are same, called in different terms. To cover this gap between income and expenditure, and if the government wants to spend more than it receives in income, the government borrows money. This borrowing is called public debt. When a payment on this borrowing is due and the government lacks a budget or a fiscal surplus, it often borrows again. Not always just to fund the new roads or hospitals or anything, but instead just to cover the dues of the previous borrowing. This is known as debt refinancing. That is, taking a loan to cover another loan. Or almost in all the cases, this new loan will be having a higher interest rate. So debt refinancing increases the burden on a government. Countries also export and import goods. For example, in case of India, we export a lot of agricultural products and import lots of crude oil. If a country exports more in value than it imports, it has a current account surplus. But don't get excited, India does not have a surplus. Instead, India has a current account deficit, meaning we import more in value than we export. When India exports something, we receive dollars, and when we import something, we spend dollars. Since India imports more, it spends more dollars than it receives. This again creates another mismatch, but no need to worry because we have other sources other than the trade through which dollar flows into India. Like when foreign investors arrive and invest here, they bring dollars. This is known as capital account surplus or capital inflow. This balances our current account deficit. But if a geopolitical crisis happens, like the Middle East war happening now, fewer foreigners will arrive, or even worse, existing foreigners will pull out their investments and take the dollar out of India. Dollar inflows through this route also stops. That is, we are now faced with both current account deficit and capital account deficit. No dollar is coming in, instead it is only going out. This situation is called a balance of payments crisis. Under such a situation, RBI taps into our foreign exchange reserves to cover this dollar shortage. Altogether, persistent demand for dollars in India, especially by the people who want to import things like crude oil, we need to buy more dollars by selling rupees because we will be having a shortage of dollar. Now this causes the rupee to depreciate. Now let us discuss the Fiscal Monitor Report by IMF. What is it saying? It is saying that global gross public debt increased to about 94% of the global GDP in 2025. Global gross public debt means the total amount of debt owed by all the governments in the world combined. It is projected to reach 100% of GDP by 2029, a level last seen in the aftermath of Second World War. When governments borrow again at higher interest rates for debt refinancing, we already saw that this interest bill that the countries currently pay on their debt has jumped from 2% to 3% of the world GDP. If global debt keeps rising, this interest bill may grow even more. If interest payments keep on increasing, governments would spend less on areas relating to growth and development, which could affect a country's long-term growth potential. Budget deficit of US is 7 to 8% of GDP. That is, US also spends more than it earns as income, and that is equal to 7 to 8% of GDP. Other than IMF, the official United States Department itself is saying that its budget deficit, US budget deficit, is expected to increase to 6.7% of GDP in 2036. Because US deficit will be covered by more borrowings, and increasing US budget deficit means increased borrowings by the US. As a result, larger share of global capital will flow into the US assets because US is considered as a safe haven, leaving less capital for other countries like India. This would raise the cost of capital, basically interest rate, for other borrowers around the world like India, because investors who are already invested in the US would demand higher compensation to take their fund out of the safe place like US. Why is this worrying for India? Because India also runs a budget deficit and it also needs to borrow. When such borrowings are not met by the savings of the Indian people, India depends on the foreigners' fund. But since such people already invested in the budget deficit of US, they have no reason to come to India. If India has to reduce this dependence on foreigners investing in Indian fiscal deficit, then obviously India has to first reduce its debt and budget deficit. What is Fiscal Monitor report saying about India, by the way? India's general government debt is expected to decline from 84% of GDP in 2025 to 77.7% in 2031. General government debt means the debt of union government plus state government plus local government combined. But even though in 2031 this general government debt is projected to reduce, in absolute terms it will be higher than what we paid in 2019. The general government budget deficit is expected to decline from the current level of 7.4% of GDP to 6.6% of GDP in 2031. Why is this debt and deficit expressed as a percentage of GDP? Because it helps in easy comparison across the world. Therefore, to prevent the adverse situations, India must reduce its general government debt and fiscal deficit at a fast pace. In summary, the global economy is navigating a particularly challenging phase. India, given its dependence on foreign dollar inflows, is especially vulnerable. Accordingly, the country must prudently reduce its debt obligations and channel the freed up capital towards the private sector to sustain growth and financial stability. Thank you.